Hey everybody, this is the Adventure Chat show. This is episode 9, and I'm Nick Savacci.
And I'm Mike Schaefer. Today we're going to talk about lockers, why you need them, when to use them, and when not to use them.
All right, Mike, here we are.
Yep.
So here we are. We're gonna talk about lockers, and if you need them.
If you need them.
If you need them.
You need them.
You need them. Yeah. As long as you already have light bars.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, light bars before lockers. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. So, and then we're also going to talk about some opinions that we have about the appropriate application for
Yeah, because you and I kind of differ a little bit about when to turn
do.
them on and stuff.
We do. And it's funny because I didn't realize that we differed on that until I think we were wheeling together for 2 or 3 years before I sort of, like it came to, I realized.
I remember it came up in a conversation one time. I don't remember if you asked me or I asked you, because you would. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Let's start at the beginning, though. Let's explain what a locker does, because I think there's a lot of people out there that may not understand open differential versus a lock differential, stuff like that.
And I think that's a great one for you. I mean, I understand it, but you definitely are way more mechanically inclined than I am.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, why don't you
let me see if I can
one?
explain this in a way that makes sense to me and everybody out there.
Okay.
Your car, most cars, I'll say it like this. Every car, some off-road trucks today, like your Rubicons, your TRD Tacomas and stuff, they differ a little bit. But I'm going to say 80 to 90% of the cars out there today come with an open differential rear end. Okay. And that open differential rear end works for 85, 90%, 95% of the people out there.
Absolutely.
What that does is when you turn your car into a circle, okay, you're actually making 2 circles. Your wheel on the outside is making a circle. The wheel on the inside is making a circle.
Correct.
Because the wheel on the inside is making a smaller circle, right, because it's on the inside of your turn, that wheel needs to spin at a slower rate than the wheel on the outside does, right? Because that diameter of that circle is larger on the outside, so it's got more ground to cover up. What an open differential does is it takes the power from the front of your vehicle in a rear-wheel drive application, which is primarily what we're talking about.
Yep.
Okay? It splits that power, your differential on your vehicle splits that power to those 2 wheels, the inside and the outside. That open differential that is inside of that axle housing there allows that outer wheel to spin at a little bit faster speed than the inside wheel. And that's why open differentials are good. You need that, because otherwise you would drive around every turn in a parking lot squealing tires.
But in an off-road application.
That can be a bad thing.
Can be a bad thing.
And the reason is, what happens is, in an open differential axle and an open differential, if you get one wheel that doesn't have weight on it, let's say it gets up in the air because you're articulated out or something like that, what's going to happen is when power is applied to that differential, it's going to send all that power out the wheel that has no resistance. That power will follow the path of least resistance.
Correct.
And I know in an audio situation like we're in here, that's kind of hard to explain. I will say there are some amazing videos from the 20s, the 30s. I mean, old videos, probably not that old, but like the 50s and stuff. That really give a good visual explanation of how an open differential works.
Right.
Okay. So now that we've kind of got that out of the way, go to YouTube, look them up, check them out. There's some great stuff out there.
I think the gist to take away is just realize that an open differential, it's not sending power to both wheels at the same time.
Yes.
It's sending power to the wheel that has the least resistance.
Exactly.
Which is problematic off-road.
That's a good, simple explanation for probably I'm over engineering this.
No, that was good though. It was good.
But yeah, so what we want off-road though, because we're in a situation where we're lifting tires, we're flexing out, we've got more weight on one wheel than the other. We want to be able to send that power to that wheel that is on the ground.
Traction.
So let's say I'm in a solid axle Jeep Rubicon and I'm teeter-tottering on 2 wheels. I've got one wheel stuffed on one corner on the front, and I've got one wheel stuffed on one wheel on the other corner in the back.
Yep.
Okay? All my power is going to go out to those 2 wheels hanging in the air.
That's right.
But if we apply what's called a differential locker, what that does is it takes the 2 axle shafts that connect both wheels and it mates them together. And what it does is it says, okay, there's no differential action anymore. I'm sending 100% power this way. I'm sending 100% of my power this way. Or I guess 50% one way, 50%. You know, however you want to look at it.
Right.
Basically, it's taking all the power available and it's sending it equally to both of those wheels.
Yep.
And what that's going to allow you to do in that situation where you're teeter-tottering, now I've got power going in my two wheels on the ground, I'm going to be able to make forward progress.
That's right. Because you're
That's
taking
how a
advantage
locker
of that.
works.
Taking
Yes.
advantage of that traction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of you've turned a lot of off-road, you know, people will call 4x4 is a 4x4. In reality, it's a 2x4 if you got two wheels off the ground.
That's right.
You're turning your 4x4 into a true four-wheel. I've got four wheels turning forward.
Doing the work. That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. Okay. So I think let's take quickly, now that people understand what a locker's doing, let's take quickly and just talk about before we get into the pros, because obviously we're just a spoiler alert, we're pro lockers.
Yeah.
Let's just say, first off, there's a couple different types. You know, the big
Yes.
one everybody knows about is like the ARB, the air
Yeah.
lockers. That's using air pressure to slide the thing to lock the two.
And that's kind of the best of both worlds too. I don't know if we want to get too much into this, but
Right.
that allows you to have a true locker when you need it. When it's unlocked, it acts just like an open differential, so you're not squealing tires in the in and out drive-through.
Right. Yep. And then most of your stuff from the manufacturers, right? The OEM manufacturers are going to be, so say your Chevy Colorado, your Toyota
Toyotas, yeah.
TRD,
They love 'em.
they're going to be electronic lockers. Okay.
Works just like an AirB, but it's electronically
Right.
controlled.
Yep. And then you have, I think the slang term for it is lunchbox locker, but it's basically, it's just the spring
Yeah,
loaded.
I think
right?
lunchbox. There's two. I think it's you're talking about the mechanical lockers essentially.
Yeah, that just sort of lock on
I think
their own.
the lunchbox gets used, but I think the lunchbox is the one that just replaces the spider gears, whereas like a Detroit is a full carrier.
Gotcha.
So there's a little bit. It's an automatic locker is what it is.
Yeah. So it's basically at a certain, almost like a, if I'm understanding right, you can correct me, it's almost like a limited slip differential in the sense that it's going to hold the lock.
Yeah.
But a certain amount of differential between
Yes.
the, let's say, what is it, tension on the
Basically
one
it
wheel
takes,
or the other.
it takes a certain amount of brake force
Right.
between those two. And I don't know exactly the word, but I know it takes a certain amount of brake force between those two wheels to unlock it.
then
And they're
it unlocks
generally kind of
automatically.
noisy. You'll hear them clicking and ratcheting around.
Yep.
And I know a lot of guys, I used to wheel with some guys that ran Detroits in the back of the rig, axles, which were phenomenal lockers. They're super bulletproof.
Yep.
But there comes some drivability on the street with them. Like, you know, them guys used to say you never made a turn under load. You would slide the clutch in because if you were on the gas in a turn, it would almost act like a spool.
Yep.
Because it didn't want to release. But if you kind of coasted through the turn, they would do their differential thing. And and there's some pros and cons of those too. We can kind of get into if you want. Or
Yeah. Well, I think
Anyway.
I think we should talk about the cons
Yeah.
for sure. I would say, I guess if you're listening and you're a physicist or a mechanical engineer, maybe if you're on YouTube, throw a comment below and let us know what that term is called. But it's basically the difference in, I think, maybe the force.
Yeah, it's
between
a
the
difference
one
in,
to the
yeah.
other. So comment below if you know exactly what the phrasing is for that. But I think it's important first, before we get into our laundry list of pros.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the cons, and I'm going to take an easy one because you're smarter than I am.
real quick before we jump into this.
Oh
man,
yeah,
I'll bring up
go ahead.
one more locker version.
Did I miss one?
The spool.
The spool.
The spool.
Okay.
And it's like the ultimate, like, this is what your rock buggies, full-time rock crawlers are going.
Gotcha. So
running is-
explain that. What is
A spool is literally, it's a chunk of metal that ties the two axle shafts together, and there's no differential ever going to happen.
Oh, so it's like, okay, so it's always locked.
It's always locked.
Okay,
It's literally a spool. You get two wheels. You know, some guys will do it with a welder and call it a Lincoln locker.
Yeah, like a welded differential.
It's a welded differential.
Lincoln lockers in the welder.
Yeah.
Okay,
But if we're going to talk about pros and cons, we'll talk about them a little bit. But yeah,
right.
that's kind of your main ones. You got automatic lockers, your disconnecting lockers.
Yep.
Your full spool and an open differential. That's kind of your main ones you got.
Gotcha.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you in.
No, yeah. I mean, this is why we're both here.
I know there's some dude out there listening to this going, "You didn't talk about spools, the ultimate off-road."
Oh my gosh. I got a funny story about that. I'm gonna tell this story real fast. I'm gonna tell it fast because I don't want this episode to have to be too long. So I'm a Datsun guy, right? So I've been building Z cars since I was little, anyway, and the limited slip differentials that you can get out of certain years are highly sought after. And if you find it online and it's somebody that doesn't know what they have, you can get them pretty cheap. But if it's somebody that knows what they have, you know, it's going to be, at the time anyway, it'd be $800 or $1,000 to buy this limited slip differential that can go into all these other Z car years. And I saw one on Craigslist, and it had the fin cover on the back, which is an indication that it's the R200 that's a limited slip. And it was like $150. And I should have been like, too good to be true. I got there, I saw the fin cover, I was like, this is legit. I spun the thing and both sides spun, you know, the output shafts, and I tried to free it up. I couldn't get one to break free of the other, and I was like, it was welded. I got it home and I took it apart, and it was freaking welded, and somebody had just put that aluminum cover on there. I'm like, dang it, you got me.
Oh man.
But anyway, so you know, if
that'd be good for donuts.
Yeah, right. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. So let's talk about cons then first, and I'll take an easy one, and I'm just going to say, you know, drivability is like the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Drivability is what people are going to say, and this is where a selectable locker comes in handy, and that's that. If you're locked all the time, then your street driving is, you know, you're going to be chirping wheels all the time. If you're locked up front, it's very difficult to steer a lot of times. And so having that selectable locker allows you to have sort of the best of both worlds, or an open diff, but then of course you don't have the traction benefits of a locker. Allows you to say, okay, this is a scenario where an open diff, quote unquote, is more beneficial, so let me shut it off and disconnect everything. Or this is a scenario where I want it to be locked, so let me lock it. And so that's going to be a big con if you have something that's locked all the time, or when your locker's engaged, is that your drivability is actually decreased a little bit as far as road manners and maneuverability.
And I think if you're like in the market for a locker right now, and you're daily driving your Tacoma or you're overlanding your Jeep or whatever, don't look at spools.
No.
Like, those dudes are reserved for drag race cars, rock bouncers, like full-time. I trailer my rig to the trail, I unload it. You know, if you're in that scenario, then a spool is super strong, super cheap, and a great way to go. Gotcha. But like if you're overlanding and stuff, like, don't even look at those. Yeah, but I mean, obviously your open differential is always going to be your best streetable option.
Right.
But like you said, I think that's the benefit to running a selectable locker, air, electric, like that, because you essentially are open on the streets, just like you were talking about. But when you need it, you push a button, and now you're spooled. Now you're off road, and you're 100% locked up.
Yep. Okay. What are your thoughts? Any other cons to?
I think cons. Probably the biggest con to running a selectable is it's a more complicated system versus some of them. Obviously, open differential, been around forever, it works. You know,
potential for failure.
Spool, you're not gonna, there's not a lot of movement. It's one part,
Right.
There's a lot of potential for problems with air lockers, with electric lockers. But with that being said, ARB has been around forever. And I think most of the failures that I ever see with those is more airline feed issues. And I know I keep a couple air fittings and stuff the truck to put mine back together.
I keep extra solenoid as well.
Their
actuator solenoid.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, worst case scenario, you can always plumb air straight into a tube and hold it there.
Yeah.
But so I mean, a lot of those, yes, they are complicated, but they are a very proven technology. Toyota has been using the e-locker since, 90. I don't know in the Land Cruiser. I know in the 4Runners and Tacomas, they've been out since 96, something 90s, like that. Yeah. I mean, they're a proven technology, So I personally don't worry about it. My truck, and you can tell you what yours has too. My truck, I've got a factory Toyota e-locker in the back in little black, and I've got an ARB air locker in the front.
Yeah, and I'm running. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, they have been. I've not had issues with either one of them ever, and they've been through heck and back. So.
Yep. Yeah, same. I'm running. I have a first gen Xterra, so a locker was not a possibility from the factory. So I have ARB up front and in back.
Yeah.
never had an issue. The only issue I have is that the solenoid spews out some of the diff fluid. You know, you get a little of that residue.
Yeah,
kicking
mine
out,
does
and
that too.
and I went in and I changed the O-rings in there. I think unfortunately I think that's probably quote unquote the weakest point of those is just everybody I talk to has that same problem.
think it's just inherent.
It just doesn't seal great. But as far as like any functionality of the locker, never had a problem.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
And actually, Sean even turned me on to venting the vent on the air locker, the ARB solenoid. You know, it's got that little vent on the top.
Yeah.
You can actually buy a fitting that fits into that screws into that.
Yep.
And you can use the regular ARB blue line and vent that somewhere. So like mine, I just ran it down right basically onto the A-arm.
Just dump it out.
So that when I vent, it just lubricates my A-arm every time. You know,
There you
so
go.
and it's not a lot of oil. It's just
No,
it's just a little bit of mist every time.
Yeah. But you know, a little mist of oil. I mean, it looks like a lot of oil. It's not a lot. And I think kind of talking in what you're talking about with the reliability of the electronic lockers, I can't say that I've ever been out with anybody where the factory electronic lockers didn't function. I think the only issue I've seen mostly was second gen Xterras, but I know sometimes like our third gen Toyota was a little touchy sometimes, but sometimes the electronic nannies won't let it engage.
Oh yeah.
So you
just a new vehicle.
gotta do the shimmy, back up this way and do that, and then finally it'll let it engage.
Yeah.
But as far as functionality, once it's engaged, I've never seen anybody have an issue.
I think the only issue I've ever seen, we wheeled with a guy, and I think I wheeled with him one time, and he was in a built late 80s 4Runner, and he had E-locker axles in it. And I think all his issues was wiring because he had retrofitted those in and didn't. The wiring on the Toyota, if you try to retrofit one in, is a little bit goofy. You got to use a couple relays and stuff and do some crazy stuff.
Gotcha.
But all that to say, the one nice thing about it was his E-locker didn't work, but all he did was crawl underneath it and pull the shift fork out, slide it over with a screwdriver to lock it, and then put the shift cylinder back in, and it was locked. It was literally, I think, three 12 millimeter nuts, pull it off, click, slide it in, and it was locked.
Okay.
So, I mean, worst case scenario on a Toyota E-locker of that generation, I know the newer one's a little bit different. You can actually do them in like 5 minutes with a screwdriver if you had to. And there's manual conversions for those too. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
No, there's a cable conversion.
Cable
for those,
conversion.
yeah.
That's the way to go.
We'd like to take a quick break to thank a couple sponsors of the 2024 Rogue Overland Expedition. The first sponsor we would like to thank is the Perfect Bungee. We've been using the Perfect Bungee products for well over 6 years at this point, and we absolutely love their Adjust-A-Strap bungee. We always say you never knew you needed a bungee until you had the opportunity to use the Perfect Bungee. On top of that, they also make shock strap tie downs, and additionally, they make dog toys. So check them out. They're made in America, which you know we love. You can find the information on them at theperfectbungee.com. The next company we would like to thank is Dragonfly Tarps. Dragonfly Tarps makes custom tarps for every outdoor adventure. We first came across this company when we were trying to find an awning solution for our adventure van build. And what we love about their Haku van tarp setup is that it gives a ton of shelter when it's deployed, but when you don't need it, it's tucked nicely away inside the vehicle. We like it so much that we actually have mounted one to Onconius, our solid axle swapped Nissan Xterra. Definitely check them out for your tarp/awning solutions on your vehicle builds. You can find them at dragonflytarps.com.
Keep it simple.
I don't want to overlook it. I know we talked a little bit about it, pros and cons, and I wanted to ask you what you recommend. You know, what of all those lockers, what's your favorite? But I don't want to grace over the automatic lockers too much too. They are good, solid. The Detroit, there's a bunch of them out there. The Yukon's got some. They are proven.
Yeah. I actually, there's a couple guys in the Nissan community that we've wheeled with a lot.
Yeah.
That have them up front. I think is Ox Locker, is that one? Or
I think
Aussie
there's
Lockers.
Aussie Lockers
Aussie
out
Locker,
there.
yeah.
The one that was always popular when I was younger was, and I mean they're still around. I say it now, but the power lock or the Lockrights.
Lockrite, yeah.
The Lockrights.
Right. Yeah.
And the nice thing about those is they're kind of cost efficient. Like you can pick up a Lockrite for $300, I think, or something
$200,
like that.
yeah.
And you can actually, if you've got the right differential for it, you can put a locker in your vehicle without ever changing the ring gear. Like you basically just remove the spider gears and throw one of them in,
Yeah.
and you're locked. So they are inexpensive, and depending on what kinds you get, full Detroit, obviously you got to set up your ring gear again, which isn't too bad, but they're inexpensive. Like the lunch boxes, and that's kind of the one that just replaces the guts of the carrier, not the carrier itself.
Right.
But they're fairly easy. You can do them anybody can do them in your driveway and stuff. So that is a benefit to those.
Yeah. And I've seen them function well too.
Oh, they're solid, yeah.
The only issue is sometimes, right, like you're in a
It's a
situation where you
drivability
want to
thing.
turn and it won't quite let go, and then finally it'll let
And
go.
that's kind of the downfall to them, in my opinion.
Right.
Is they're locked all the time, but you have to almost be a little bit aggressive to get them to unlock sometimes. And like I was saying before, my buddies would say you'd have to coast through a right turn.
Right.
Because if you were powered through a right turn, it wouldn't
It's
unlock.
holding the engagement. Right.
And I know we've wheeled with guys that, some Xterra guys that had, I think he had a lock right in the front of his Xterra, and turning that thing in Moab in 4-wheel drive was a nightmare.
Terrible.
Was a nightmare.
Terrible. I got tired of hearing I can't turn the steering wheel
Yeah.
by the end of the trip.
But I get it. I understand what he's fighting, because he's it's IFS differential anyway, and then you're trying, you're turning, so your wheels are spinning a little bit, but probably not enough to break that torque.
Yeah.
And I get it. I know, like my 4Runner, if, we'll talk about that in a minute, but my 4Runner, when the front end is locked with that ARB, it's essentially a spool when it's locked up. You can't turn that truck.
Yeah.
Like, you're not turning those wheels. Like, it's not happening. So
Yeah.
I get it. But, but that's one thing. If you're looking at all those locker options, that's one thing you need to look at. They're cheap. They're easy to get into. They're easy to install. There is some drivability stuff there that you do need to be aware of, though.
And I think that kind of goes into a con that that I've got in my back pocket here is cost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there are varying costs, of course, and that's going to lead to different levels of, let's just say, how enjoyable they are to use. But there's a cost, whether you get a TRD Toyota or you get a Pro 4X Frontier, and you've got the electronic locker from the factory, you're paying more for that model. If you get an ARB locker, you're paying $1,000 for that locker.
A lot of times,
Let alone you need the compressor and all of that.
I think we talked about this last weekend on the Canva trip. A lot of times, it's actually cheaper to buy the base model truck. Like, well, for example, like back in the day, I had an 01 Tacoma, and it was a TRD, okay? And the TRDs had the rear locker. Most of them had the E-locker in the back. Everything else that was TRD on that truck got thrown away.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, how much did I pay for that TRD package just to keep the locker?
To get the locker.
I'm like, I could have bought a base truck and threw an ARB in it and probably saved myself $3,000 or $4,000.
Right.
And that's one thing you need to look at too.
Yeah,
But
no, 100%.
Not squirrel, but yeah.
Yeah, but either way, the fact of the matter, and that's a good point. But the fact of the matter is that there's cost associated with
Yes.
it. I mean,
No matter what
if
you do.
you have an open diff front and back, that's, let's call the baseline. Now, any amount of locker that you're going to go, even if it's the lock right or whatever, you're still throwing money at it.
Yeah.
So you have to decide,
What's your balance
what's my
there?
budget,
Yeah.
what's
your balance there? I think that's a key important.
Yeah.
Now you can always throw your buddy with a welder a 6-pack of beer to weld up your rear end for you, but good luck.
Weekend car. I think, I don't know. I feel like that's it, because lockers are just amazing. But do you have any other cons that you can think of for lockers?
No, I mean, like, I think beyond everything else, the biggest con is just trying to keep the girls off of you when you're climbing up the trail.
That's true.
It gets to be hard. It weighs on me sometimes.
Because you just do it with such style and panache.
All right. So out of all those lockers, you got open differential, which if you say open, then I'm walking out and never talking to you again.
The podcast is over.
Podcast is over. Our friendship is over. Open, selectable, automatic, spool. What is your go-to for what we do? And I guess maybe that's a kicker right there. And I'm gonna say what we do is road driving, hardcore rock crawling, overlanding. I like to say that I built a dual sport rig. It's good at everything. It's not great at any one thing. But for that stuff that we kind of do, I guess, in our situation, what is your go-to locker?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's, and right, like, preface, It depends on what you're going to
Yes.
do, okay? But for what we do, it's selectable all the way, and I really enjoy the fact with the air locker, when I flip the switch, it's going to lock up,
Yeah.
right? That third gen Tacoma on Conius and Helios, and if you haven't seen that, you can go on our YouTube channel, and you can see a build video of that rig. It was a great rig. That dang e-locker in the back, I mean, it really was testy. Like it really, I would have to do the little truck shimmy to get it to lock. So for me, it's an air locker all the way because there's no nannies getting involved. When I flip that switch, it's locked.
Yeah, and I think for me, I love the air lockers too, and that's what's in the front of my truck. I think at the end of the day, that's my favorite go-to locker is that A or B air locker. And I know there's another couple other companies that are messing with air lockers now too, and I'm sure they're great, but A or B is the one I've used and I know
It's tested.
It's tested, like I've tested it personally. I haven't had the issues with my e-lockers in my two trucks that you have had in that one, but I will say, I think everybody watching or listening can, these newer trucks, the newer Toyotas, all of them, those nannies get weird. And I think all the Jeeps and everything kind of have some of them same issues.
100%.
My e-lockers are in rigs that are a little more, they were a little bit simpler back then, a 2000 4Runner, a 2001, essentially like the computer needed a ground signal and it would turn it off. It didn't care about anything else. Yeah. So for me, the e-lockers and the Toyotas have been phenomenal. I know a lot of guys running the Jeep lockers have had really good luck with them, and I think they're even the older ones were air too, but they're selectable. But anyway, that's kind of my go-to. Is obviously if I'm running that generation Toyota, the e-locker's great, but other than that, I love the selectable. The air lockers are phenomenal.
Just solid.
Yeah.
Okay, so we knocked out the cons, yeah?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Pros. Traction for days.
Traction for days.
Traction forward. Oh, you know what? Let me take half a step back.
Okay.
Let me take half a step back.
You had an epiphany.
I got an epiphany, however you say that. I'm not that smart. I'm just a gearhead. So I would say I think we should comment on breakability, right? Breakability.
Okay,
Because I think that should be listed as a con, and that is that when you lock those two, they're locked, and your potential for breaking things. Well, I don't know. I don't know if this
I'm excited. Go ahead and finish your statement.
This is going to open Pandora's box.
Finish your statement because I want to talk about this.
Man, all right. Maybe,
I want to talk about this because
we do disagree
I've got no scientific proof about where my opinion comes from.
All right. So I'm just going to say that I think it should be considered a con that if you have a wild driving style, your potential to break is going to be more when it's locked. And this is going to open Pandora's box about our disagreement. But, take it, read any forum, read any Facebook post about an IFS guy with a locker up front. You can't put a locker up front because your front end's going to explode. And I think it's just that's weaker than a solid axle. So you see those things happen more. But I'm going to say it's a con that when they're locked together, you have a pretty high potential for breaking something in the right scenarios.
And I would agree with you that you are putting extra stress on the differential and stuff. But I don't have any proof for this, but my gut feeling, my honest opinion has always been, how do I want to word this? Okay, let me put it this way. I feel the same way about my crawl box. Lockers give me control. Okay, is how I feel about it. If I come up to an obstacle, right, and I'm flexed out, and I got open differentials, and I got a wheel in the air spinning, a lot of times I could rock back and forth. I could kind of get it. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is get another wheel in that to catch. Okay, but if I have a locker, right, and those two wheels are locked together, and I've got a wheel on the ground, it's a real smooth transition for me to push the vehicle forward because I do have a wheel and traction.
So I want to anecdotically explain.
You talk about my big words, man.
Yeah, right. I want to explain Mike and mine's.
Maybe we should.
Let's go
back
our
there.
difference of opinion in a story. All right, so Mike, we come up to an obstacle, right? We come up to an obstacle, and it's not a life or death obstacle, but it's a very difficult obstacle.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very difficult obstacle. Now, when I come up to this obstacle, I am going to give it the old college try, say 1 or 2 times. Again, if it's life or death, if it's a scary, hard obstacle, then I'm gonna be locked up.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if it's not life and death, I'm gonna come up to it and I'm gonna give it the old college try, open, for 1 or 2 goes
Yeah.
and see if I can solve the problem.
Yeah.
And then if I can't solve it, I'm gonna go locker. But if you come up to the same obstacle, this is where we differ in opinion. How do you approach that obstacle?
So this is yeah, because Nick, and I've watched you do this so many times, and I've been spotting you too. Yeah. And Nick will come up to an obstacle, open, and he will try some different lines, and he will do this, and he will do that. And in my head, and I've actually yelled at Nick before, like, just turn the freaking locker on.
Yes.
Like, I don't understand, like, why you're sitting here just effing around with this thing. We got 15 more miles of trail up here now.
Right.
I've always been of the opinion, like, I have a locker in my truck for a reason. And I can read my truck, too. I've got a pretty good idea, 90% of the time when I put my truck on an obstacle, what it's going to do, depending on how the truck is configured from the cab, right? Lockers, crawl box, whatever.
Yep. It's going to put a tire in there, guaranteed.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to lift the tire.
Third gen, it's you going in the mall, it's lifting a tire.
But I can pretty much tell, like, I'm going to need a locker on that.
Yeah.
And, I'm selectable lockers. I will a lot of times get it lined up on the line that I need to be on. And as I'm rolling into it, I'll flip the locker on because I know the rear end's going to slip a little bit. Let it walk up the obstacle and move on.
True.
And I understand what you do. I know you like to play and you like to oh, can I do this with I don't know, man. For me, it's just like, I can flip a locker on and walk right up this thing and look like a boss. And why wouldn't I? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm not spinning a tire. Because to me, and here's what scares me. And this is where I go back to that conversation we had a couple minutes ago about being stronger or weaker.
Right.
Okay? You're trying to climb something and you've got one wheel sitting there dragging you down and you've got one wheel spinning like this, right? You've got a bunch of little gears inside your differential doing this crap, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when that wheel down there catches and all of a sudden it and this wheel are moving the same speed instantaneous?
Right.
You've just shock loaded the crap out of everything in across that axle all the way up into your differential.
Yeah. Yep. And I can totally see that opinion, and I do want to preface, I'm spiting the gods at this point in time, so I'm gonna knock on wood. But I do want to preface and say that Mike is one of the most controlled drivers that I've ever seen, and I consider myself a pretty finesseful driver. I mean, I think you and I combined have broke on the trail in the last 10 years. I don't even know, maybe twice. So I am in no means saying that you should hit an obstacle like full bore wheels spinning. But
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I'm not saying that you're going out there spinning wheels. Like, Nick is definitely not one to pin it to win it. That is definitely not his wheeling style.
I'm talking about, can I find a way to get 2 wheels on something so that I don't need that locker? But so that's our fundamental difference of opinion in when the appropriate time to implement the lockers are. And there's no right answer, I don't think, but it would be it would be great to know what you think. So if you're watching this on YouTube, throw a comment below and let us know. Do you hit it and right away it's the locker, and that way you can be as controlled as possible? Because Mike's absolutely right. With lockers on, you instantly go in with the most control possible. Or do you go in and you want a little bit of a challenge and you implement some of those things as you decide that you can't overcome that without them? So comment below, let us know what you think on that.
I think sometimes it's easier, and on the harder obstacles too. I feel like I've seen times where, not with you necessarily, but other people, where they'll go into it open and actually get more hung up and worse because they're trying to climb over a rock with half the traction that they have available to them.
Yep.
And by the time they turn on that locker, they're so screwed up in there. They're sitting on top of a rock or everything else that it's winch time at that point.
Yeah, and that can of course be a bad situation. So what do you think? So our fundamental difference of opinion is on the side. What would you say? We've covered, I think, traction being a pro for lockers, and that's just the fact that there's no question. You have twice as much traction in theory, right? Because you have twice as many wheels working for you. So that's almost always going to be helpful off road. I can't think of a situation where it wouldn't be, but I'm sure somebody will say there's one. What else do you think? Like any other pros that you would say?
As far as running a locker?
Just as far as having a locker, anything else people should consider?
I think that's a lot of. We kind of covered a lot of it. I do want to touch in. You brought up something a little bit ago about having a locker and an IFS front. Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah,
but I don't want to move on to that until you're ready to.
No, I think
we kind of hit the
I think the pros of lockers are you should have lockers.
You should have lockers.
So if you're
just cruising dirt roads, if you're just cruising fire roads all the time, you can definitely put your money somewhere else. But if you want to start hitting harder trails, it's time for lockers.
If you're wheeling, then at some point you should incorporate lockers.
100%.
Even if it's just to make sure that you don't end up in a bad scenario button.
Yeah.
So, okay, so go ahead. Let's talk.
I've got a lot of experience running ARB locker in IFS, and I know. Did you ever run before this guy was solid swap? Did you ever run a locker in the front of that truck?
No. So on Conius, the solid axle swapped Xterra was open on 32 by 12.5 tires with crawler gears in the transfer case.
Okay.
Never a locker up front.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say there's no doubt to me that I've got a 7.5-inch ring gear clamshell front differential on the 4Runner on 35s.
Yep.
I'm definitely pushing my luck with that thing anyway without a locker. There's definitely a time if you're talking about putting a locker in the front of a IFS truck like that, there's definitely some stuff you should be aware of.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I'm just gonna throw my experience. The way I use my front locker in my truck, I always make fun of you because I'm like, well, I'm just gonna throw the rear locker on and send it, But that front locker, I only use that front locker when I need it, because like I said a while ago too, we were talking about front locker in a front IFS is that truck does not steer.
Right.
So the way you use that front locker is like, okay, I need the front locker in this scenario. I'm going to get my wheels straight. I'm going to get them lined up where they want to go. And in theory, it's as straight as possible.
Yep.
I'm going to flip the locker on to bump myself up and over, and then I'm flipping that locker right back off again.
Yeah.
Because, it is a small front differential.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe this is a good opportunity if anybody wants to learn about the points that are likely to lead to a failure.
Yeah. I got a good story for you.
With the front locker. Yeah, I was just going to say, I know one of the few times that you've broke on the trail, and I love hearing this story because it is just, in a sense, the perfect storm and all the wrong things to do.
Yeah.
So let's hear about the time that you did break.
This was years. This was actually my Tacoma. Probably, it's had to be 12 years, 13. It's been a long time ago.
Yep.
And I think we've talked about it before, but I've got a Marlin crawler in my truck too. So it's my total crawl ratio is 179-1. So a lot of torque. By the time it hits the wheels, there's a lot of torque.
Oh yeah.
We were out by Lake Mead. There was a trail, and I don't even know if you can get to it anymore, but it ended up in some red rocks. Okay. And I went up this V-notch, and you get to the end of the V-notch, and you've got to make a right-hand turn to kind of get out of the V-notch up this other V-notch that is continuing to climb, right?
Okay.
So I got up there, and I got the front end up on it. I was full steering locked on one side. I had the driver's side.
That's bad thing number one.
Full turn, okay, double O. So I'm at 179-1. Okay. The wheels dropped completely out.
Okay, so your suspension is completely
packed.
drooped.
I'm completely stuffed on this side. Completely drooped on this side.
Ding,
right?
ding. Bad thing number two.
So the CV is as far down as it will go. Yep. It's full turned as far as it go. I'm at 179-1. Okay, locker on. And I'm running up this thing, spinning the wheels, trying to get the front end of the truck to pull it, to slide. Oof. Okay? And my buddy was standing beside me, and I did this a couple times, basically. Full lock, everything wrong, up, give it a little gas, spin, 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 stuck, back up. And I repeated this a couple times. And I literally looked out my window of my buddy and I said, I'm going to blow a CV shaft. I am literally doing everything wrong right now.
Yep.
And about 15 seconds later, I heard it go, bing!
Yep.
And my buddy, it blew the cage apart on the CV. And my buddy actually found part of the cage, went through the CV boot, and he found it like 10 feet in front of the truck.
Wow.
And I ended up pulling a winch to drag the front end over to get it up over this little Red Rock thing down on the flat so I could change the CV axle. But I mean, they'll take a lot more abuse than you think they will take,
Yes.
but it's still, you know, that front, that's a lot of pressure on the front differential. So if you're going to lock the front end, and I'll be honest, there's times I've been rear end locked, open differential in the front, and I'm trying to get up something, and I've got the front end, because it's light, is unloaded. I've got a wheel hanging and one wheel up on a rock, but because it's open, I've got this one wheel spinning.
Yeah.
And there's been times I've been like, you know, sound effects, you know, trying to get up, and I let off the throttle. I hit the front locker. It locks up, pulls me 2 inches up on top of that rock, and I can flip that thing off, and it'll just drive right through it.
Yep.
And that front locker, there's been so many times when I've used that locker like that, and it's just that extra little traction off that one wheel that's still sitting on the ground to just get me up what I need to get up.
I think the big takeaway from it is just, you know, if you're paying attention to your throttle response or throttle input,
Yes.
if you're paying attention to your throttle input, paying attention to your traction, because huge changes of in traction break things. So no
Red
traction.
rocks are hard on that stuff.
Right, red
Sandstone.
rocks, right? Everybody's heard the videos in Moab, right?
Yeah.
Your wheels are spinning, then all of a sudden they catch,
That's when
and then
crap
things
breaks.
explode. And then doing your best to keep, I'm gonna call it a neutral position, but doing your best to keep that drivetrain in, let's say it's normal functioning position,
Yeah.
right? The further stretched out or the
Yeah.
further compressed,
The strongest those shafts are is when they're straight.
when they're straight, exactly. And in those scenarios, it's so robust because I don't have experience with a front locker and IFS personally, but
Yeah.
I've seen you.
Yeah.
I've seen Sean with the FJ. You can check out the video of that amazing build with
Johan, all
long
those guys.
travel and Total Chaos long travel, locker in the front, also crawler, Atlas transfer case.
Yeah.
Google sickest FJ Cruiser, and you can watch that video.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've seen the same thing where there's hesitation to turn the locker on because maybe he's a little turned, maybe it's a little stretched out, but the suspension is a little lengthened out. But all you need is just that little bit.
Yeah,
you
a
know?
lot of times it's all you need.
You just need those couple extra inches to get you where you need to be. So
Man.
yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I've definitely done horseshoe bend out here. I think I've ran up that double lock spinning wheels going, please God, hold together, please God, hold together, you know, the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're smart with it, dude, the IFS front end will take a lot of abuse.
Yeah, they're pretty tough. And the thing of it is if you don't drive smart, you're gonna break regardless. I mean,
Oh,
you know,
yeah. If you pin it to win it.
Yeah, you know how many times? Oh my gosh, we've been out on trails and we have nothing against Jeeps. You know, lots of one of the Rogue leaders for the Rogue Expedition drives a Jeep.
Yeah.
Great wheeler, great driver. Another one of our friends in the Air Force has a Jeep.
Yeah, we like to give them crap, but we really do like them
Yeah.
too. I mean, they're as long as you're out using it, that's all that matters
Right,
to me.
but
yeah.
that's a solid front axle, and I mean,
Yeah.
I've been at events plenty of times where somebody's going up a trail, an obstacle. It's too much throttle, it's too much bounce, and something
Yeah.
in the front axle breaks, and that's a solid front axle.
Yeah.
So anything can
everything
break.
has its limitations.
You just have to consider the way that you're driving.
Yeah,
I
if you
think,
want to
and
drive
what
like
you
a
have.
rock bouncer, then you know it's time for 1 tons or deuce and a halves, and
Build a rock
you
bouncer.
know that's a whole different thing. But yeah,
All right, I don't know. I think we
yeah,
covered.
no, I feel good about it.
Yeah,
Man.
okay.
The takeaway of this is get lockers.
Get lockers, after light bars.
after
of
light
course.
bars. After light bars.
So let's see. What we need to tell you is if you're watching this on YouTube and you enjoy it, smash that like button. Consider subscribing to the channel if you like outdoor and off-road content. Also, we release the Adventure Chat show on the first and third Thursday of every month.
You almost forgot there, didn't you?
I had to process for a minute. So keep an eye out for those. And then, Mike, where can they find us?
Follow us on all the social media at Rogue Overland, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the different places. So look us up there.
That's right. And we'll see you on the trail.
Copyright Rogue Overland 2024, all rights reserved.